What the hell is Saw Sports or whatever that last call was talking about? What the hell is that?
Guys are from Free Love, man.
What is up, Sauce Nation? It is your boy Hector Flores coming at you with a video and kind of sticking to the whole theme of doing these all-time rosters or lineups, if you will. I'm going to do my all-time Houston Dynamo lineup. Now, kind of going back to what I said when I did the Astros one, this is all based on my opinion. This is who I kind of deem as guys that were great in their positions. I'm not going to do it as specific as I did it with the Astros, which doing one for actual positions. I'm just going to do it straight up. Just a simple, I'm just going to do one formation and just get players in that group, position group, and then I'll tell you a little bit as to why I picked these guys. But once again, this is my opinion. If you guys feel that, for those of you that do watch soccer and do watch the Dynamo, if you guys feel that there was somebody that you would have personally put on your list, go ahead and drop it in the comment section. Please actually go ahead and give me your guys' all-time Dynamo list if you guys have one. And, you know, if you guys have any suggestions for a video that we can do in the meantime during this current situation that we're in here. And if you guys, the one thing I will say is please make sure to stay at home. If you do not have to be out, do not go out. Just stay, and hopefully once all this is over, we can go back to living a more normal life. But till then, please just stay at home. If you don't need to be out, don't go out. But before we get going with this video, make sure you guys drop a like, comment, and subscribe to Saucy Sports TV so you guys can get that other content of the other teams in H-Town, whether it be the Houston Astros, the Dynamo, the Rockets, or any other team here in the Houston and Houston area. So without further ado, let's get going with this video. So when looking at exactly how I'm going to do this all-time Dynamo lineup, I'm going to pick a formation to at least be realistic. And the formation I'm going to actually use, for those who understand what I mean when I say formations in soccer, I'm going to be using the 4-4-2. And the reason why I'm choosing the 4-4-2 is actually that's the formation that the Dynamo used when they did win the MLS Cup in their early years. So I'm going to go ahead and use that formation. And I think it's a little bit easier because then all I have to do is just... I'll break it down for you. Obviously, I'm going to pick a goalkeeper, 4 defenders, 4 midfielders, which will also classify wingers if I do pick any, and 2 forwards. So pretty self-explanatory. It gives me a little bit more freedom to pick certain players, and I just think it's a basic formation, and it works out, and it has something to withhold of some value because that is the formation that the Dynamo used when they did win the MLS Cup. So that's what I'm going to use it for. Now, I'm going to start things off at the goalkeeper position. And, of course, I have to put Pat Onstad as the goalkeeper. Obviously, this guy is the one that won the 2 MLS Cups with the Houston Dynamo. And I think just, for at least a big while, the Dynamo have always had a pretty decent goalkeeper until recently. But, you think of Pat Onstad, you think of Talia Hall. For a good while, we had some really good goalkeepers, and it just kind of fell off after Tyler Derrick got injured. But yeah, my number 1 goalkeeper is Pat Onstad. For the defense, I'm going to start things off with Wade Barrett, who was the captain that lifted the trophy for the Houston Dynamo. At one point was a manager for the Houston Dynamo, but obviously he was an interim during the Owen Coyle year, and then obviously was then followed by Wilmer Cabrera. Then the other defender I'm going to use is Eddie Robinson, kind of going back to that, the 06, 07 Dynamo teams. So Eddie Robinson, another one. Plus, he is the one that announces the Dynamo games now if you go watch him on the Cube. Next player I'm going to pick is Jeff Cameron. And Jeff Cameron was actually a player that did very well with the Dynamo and had a really good career with the Dynamo. Didn't win any MLS Cups with the Dynamo, but was always pretty solid for them to the point where he got noticed in Europe, ended up transferred to Stoke City in England, and did get a lot of got calls from the U.S. men's national team, and even played in the World Cup. So Jeff Cameron obviously did have a really good career after leaving the Dynamo, but obviously started off really well with Dynamo, and he's actually one of the few rare examples of a player that got drafted off of the MLS draft that did really well. Alright, and so for my last defender, I'm going to have DeMarcus Beasley. And though he maybe didn't have a big career with the Houston Dynamo. I mean, if you really think of his MLS career, I really don't know if I would say Beasley would be better known for the Dynamo, but I think obviously he finished his career with the Houston Dynamo, and that's something to at least hold something, and as well as the fact that he was part of that U.S. Open Cup championship team, and was a pretty good captain for the Houston Dynamo for a good while. So that's why I have DeMarcus Beasley as our fourth defender. There's probably some other defenders that I kind of could have probably picked, and that was some guys that I can think of is like Bobby Boswell or Corey Ash or even Kofi Sarkodie, who was once one of my favorite players in the Dynamo. But I think that these four are very well representing for the defense. Now in the midfield, like I said, this could also be not only midfielders but also wingers as well. I'm going to start things off with Dwayne De Rosario, and I think this guy was just so fun to watch, man. His outside the box shots were just beautiful, and obviously had the very unique celebration where he did a dance after scoring a goal every time. He was just fun to watch, and he was also part of the Dynamo when they won the MLS Cup. So there is my first midfielder. My second midfielder is actually going to be Brian Mullen. So if you guys didn't know, the MLS actually have been playing former old MLS games in the meantime during this whole situation. And one of the games that they played was the 2006 MLS Cup, where the Dynamo won their first MLS Cup. And one of the things that I really remember from that game was just how intense Brian Mullen was playing in that game. He was playing on the right side, but he was just, I felt like he was in every play. He was solid defensively. He helped set up some centers, even though there was no goal scored during regular time. But I think he was such a hard-working player, and I got to give props to him. And like I said, kind of going back to those years when we won the 2 championships, he was a big factor of that. So I got to put Brian Mullen in it. The next person is actually someone highly respected, was part of that old Dynamo, that team that won the MLS Cup, but also stayed with the team for a while until he ended up leaving to go. He went to Sporting Kansas City to finish his career in his hometown of Kansas City, and that is Brad Davis. I think a lot of people calling him the left-footed David Beckham. Just had an amazing ability to shoot free kicks. Just had a really good delivery of the ball. Really solid player. So much fun to watch. I think if it wasn't for the fact that soccer doesn't retire numbers, the number 11 it should definitely be retired because of Brad Davis. But like I said, soccer just doesn't do that. If anything, it's just. But there's a lot of pressure to wear the number 11, in my opinion, especially in a Dynamo uniform. And Brad Davis is the clear reason to why there's so much pressure to wear that, to have that number 11. And then my final midfielder will be Ricardo Clark. And once again, going back to those older teams in the Dynamo, he ended up leaving the Dynamo to play in Europe, I believe, and then eventually came back to Houston and finished his. Well, they didn't really finish his career because eventually he went to Columbus Crew and then came in, signed a one-day contract to retire a Dynamo player. But he's also currently a coach with the Youth Academy, so that is a really good thing that he's still part of the Dynamo family. And Ricardo Clark, another guy that kind of just stepped up as a leader as well, wore the captain's armband a few times as well, but just a really solid player and kind of that guy, that spark on the team for many games. So definitely Ricardo Clark definitely deserves to be on that list. And for midfielders, man, there's other guys that I could think of, like Stuart Holden, who unfortunately didn't really have a good career after leaving the Dynamo due to injuries. But you could think of him. You could think of Boniek Garcia. You can throw Andrew Driver, other players that did pretty well in the midfield. But I think when I look at these four, I think that these guys deserve to be in the all-time list. Now, for forwards, I'm going to start things off. Well, there's only 2 spots left, so I'm going to start things off with Brian Ching. And the reason why I have Brian Ching is I think this guy is, to a lot of people, this is the GOAT. This is like, to the Rockets, Kemah Olajuwon, to the Astros, Nolan Ryan. Honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that he wore 25 for the Dynamo, it wouldn't be weird to think that this guy could, if he wore 34, he could be part of that, the legendary 34s like in Houston. Because I think Brian Ching just meant so much to the city of Houston like that. Played really well, obviously, in the early years. Even got called up with the U.S. men's national team. Brian Ching was just a solid player. And honestly did finish it out with the Houston Dynamo and even eventually became part of that build up for the Houston Dash. And then even though he's no longer there, he still does some things with the Houston Dynamo, but obviously has his personal business as he owns Pitch 25 that's right by BVA Stadium. So Brian Ching, I think, is very symbolic and kind of similar to what I said about Brad Davis about wearing the number 11. You really have to think twice if you're going to wear the 25 jersey, because it's a very symbolic jersey, and if you're going to wear it, you got to live up to that number. I feel like that's something that you got to ask permission to wear before you decide to wear number 25. But yeah, and then the second player is actually going to be Will Bruin. And you know, for a long time, this guy had the most goals in a season by a Dynamo player. He was just really good. It was just, I don't think he had anything special about him, but I just know he was always at the right place at the right time to score goals. And I think that was kind of the best part about Will Bruin. He was just fun to watch. You knew he was going to score a goal if he was right in front of the goal and he had the ball right there with him. He was going to score it, and I think that was kind of one of the things that you kind of knew from Will Bruin. Didn't win an MLS Cup or anything like that, but you know, he did well in his time with the Dynamo. Obviously, now he's in Seattle. And like I said, when you talk about forwards, you can obviously throw maybe Mar Manotas. You can throw Peter Daglish. There's a plethora of forwards that you could be throwing out here. But I think Will Bruin and Brian Ching are probably, to me, it works out great. Like I said, man, there's a lot of guys, especially if you know the Dynamo, you're very well knowledgeable of the Dynamo, you could probably throw over these guys, but I think that you can't argue with these guys that I picked. And so, you know, I think that this is a solid group. So I'm going to go ahead and reiterate the group one more time. So at goalkeeper, I have Pat Onstand. For defense, I have Wade Barrett, Eddie Robinson, Jeff Cameron, DeMarcus Beasley. For the midfield, I have Dwayne De Rosario, Brian Mullen, Brad Davis, Ricardo Clark. And at forward, I have Brian Ching and Will Bruin. And that's basically my all-time Dynamo list. So that's my all-time Houston Dynamo lineup. Like kind of going back when I'm talking about the Astros when I did that one, it's just pretty fun to like look back and, you know, see these guys that I watched when I was younger, and it's just kind of cool to like think like, who would I put in my dream lineup, I guess, if you will. And you know, I think I did a really good job with it, but obviously I don't think all of y'all are like big Dynamo fans like I am, so you guys probably won't know any of these names. But you know, hopefully maybe one day, or maybe some of y'all already do have your own all-time Dynamo list, but hopefully, you know, more and more as more time goes, eventually Dynamo become competitive again and people will start watching games again. But I think obviously I have a solid list. But aside from that, man, hopefully these aren't the only lists that you'll see. Maybe you'll see one from Tenny, maybe not the Dynamo list, but maybe Astros and Rockets, and we'll figure something out to do with the Texans, because I think an all Texans lineup might be a little too long to do, but we'll see what we do as far as what that goes. But if you guys like this video, please like it. Please drop in the comment section. Tell me what you guys think of my list. Tell me who you would put in your all-time Dynamo list if you have some players in mind. And subscribe to Saucy Sports TV so we can keep this channel growing. Like I said, man, we're going to try to push out some content so you guys can have something to watch, especially right now in this current situation that we're in. And hopefully you guys are, you know, staying clean and staying inside. And if you guys don't have to go out, don't go out. So with all that being said, man, chucking up a deuce. Y'all stay saucy.
Perfect.